Okay, I watched the Trump-Zelensky-Vance meltdown for us, and I took notes. So Trump starts off by being like, this is a great day. We're gonna sign a deal later. We're gonna have lunch and sign a deal. Spoiler alert, no lunch was had. No deal was signed. Then Trump does his favorite thing and continues to campaign against a man who he no longer needs to campaign against. He blames Biden. He says, it's where it never would have started if I had been president. He says that like enough times that if you're gonna watch this and play some sort of masochistic drinking game, add that to the list. He tells Zelensky that the United States has given Ukraine a bunch of great stuff, but also that their soldiers are very brave. Zelensky is like, thank you for inviting me. We count on continued support from the United States to ward off Putin, who is, of course, a killer. We shouldn't negotiate with killers or terrorists, just throwing that out there. Then we get to the issue of monetary support. Trump is like, well, Biden gave them too much support. Also, Europe gave them essentially no support at all. Then Zelensky's like, that's not true. We've had a lot of support from Europe. And then Trump is like, well, a lot less than you've had from us. And then Zelensky is like, no. Then one of the press people, and I have to say, it's giving hand-picked reporters in the room with like a sprinkling of dissenting voices, but mostly just like OAN, etc. Anyway, one of the reporters is like, what historical figures do you associate yourself with, Mr. Sir President Trump? And then Trump says George Washington, Abraham Lincoln. I mean, I'm actually far superior to George Washington. Just kidding. Totally kidding, but also not kidding. Maybe I'm better than him, just kidding, but also not. Washington famously establishing the precedent of running for only 2 terms and then stepping aside and graciously handing over power, not trying to overthrow the government and spending your 2nd term hinting at how you deserve a 3rd. Just throwing that out there. Irrelevant to the press conference, but just throwing it out there. Anyway, then Trump is like, but I don't really compare myself to people. I just want to get this done. Then he phrases it this way that he does again and again and again throughout the press conference, where he says there are Russian soldiers being killed and also soldiers from Ukraine. Always Russia first, then Ukraine in this comparison. At this point, Zelensky, who is already having trouble getting a word in, is like, well, they did come to our territory. Like, they started it. Then someone in the press is like, Zelensky says no compromises with Putin. And Trump is like, well, you can't do any deals without compromises. And then Brian Glenn looked him up, who works for Real America's Voice, which is like an alt-right network. Side note, Brian Glenn, Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend. He asks Mr. Trump if he wants to be remembered as a peacemaker, and then asks Zelensky why he isn't wearing a suit. I can only assume he's also reached out to Mr. Musk's office for comment on that issue. But Zelensky, for his part, during this entire conflict, has been showing up in clothes suggestive of Ukrainian military attire. That's his thing. He's making a point. That's what he's been doing the whole time. And he responds to Brian Glenn. Yeah, he responds to Brian Glenn by saying that maybe once the war is over, he will wear a costume, which is, people think, akin to the Ukrainian word for suit. Then we get into the question of security. Is the United States going to send people to help keep Ukraine secure, essentially to enforce a ceasefire? Is it going to be a ceasefire with teeth behind it? Trump says, well, we're going to have, like American workers digging up their raw earth materials, and that's going to protect the area. Europe wants to send security, but I don't think we'll need it because I trust Putin. Then someone from the press asks him, Trump, what gave him the courage to talk to Putin, to be friends with Vladimir Putin. Trump immediately is like, what network are you from? The guy goes, I'm from, OAN. This is the OAN guy, One American News. Famously a very alt-right pro-Trump. Anyway, Trump goes, oh, that's why I like that question. I like them a lot. Then he tries to do this weird diversion where he's like, oh, I do like Zelensky's clothes. I want you guys to get along, like talking to him and the other reporter and flirting with the room. Then Zelensky's like, let's talk about more serious things though than my outfit. We're gonna need some security guarantees. Putin really doesn't just respect deals. Like today, he knows that we're here talking, working on a deal, that you, Trump, want a deal, and still he's using ballistic missiles. Trump is like, he's gonna listen to me, and Zelensky's like, no, that's the point. Then one of the reporters asks Trump if he considers himself to be in the middle or on Ukraine's side, and he says, in the middle. That's how you do a deal. Then they're both asked essentially about like how a deal is gonna get hammered out, like a trilateral summit. How's that going to work? Is Putin going to talk to Zelensky? What's going on? And Trump is like, well, it's kind of tricky because, these guys don't really like each other. As if they're talking about like a corporate merger and not the end to a war. And Zelensky gives him this look like, this isn't a corporate merger, right? Zelensky is like, Ukraine is going to need a seat at the table in any deal regarding Ukraine. And also, just a reminder, this affects everybody. They're going to come for the Baltics next. They're going to come for Poland. I know you've got this big ocean that you think separates you, but letting Russia invade everyone affects the globe. Then one of the reporters asks Trump if he's going to go to Ukraine. And Trump is like, I don't really want to talk about that. I don't want to go to Ukraine. And Zelensky's like, you should come. You should see. We're still a nation. You should see it. Someone else asks Trump the question of the day, which is, how do you know that Putin will keep his word? And Trump says, because I'm great at making deals. Then Trump talks for a while, and again later, about this whole idea that he and Putin survived the Russia hoax together, and that has bonded them. Then, apropos of essentially nothing, someone from the press is like, as you know, Keir Starmer is arresting people for thought crimes. What are you going to do about that? Trump is like, don't worry, I let Marco and JD scold him. And then one of the reporters, who we're about to learn is from CNN, asks Trump about these resources. Because that's theoretically part of the whole idea, is that Zelensky is here today to sign this deal that commits some of the natural resources in Ukraine to the United States as, repayment for their help with the war and continued support. So the reporter is like, are you going to protect those resources? They're in some high conflict areas, some of the resources you're talking about. And Donald Trump is like, I don't know, maybe I'll study it. You know what you should be worried about? How your network is failing. That's what you should be worried about, and then doesn't answer any more of the question. And now we're rounding in on the final 10 minutes, which is where everything really starts to fall apart. JD Vance is like, now's my moment. I really want to blame Joe Biden for this. If Joe Biden had been nicer to Putin, there never would have been a war. And Zelensky's like, okay, look, let's talk timelines. Russia invaded Ukraine, Crimea in 2014. It's been going on for years through several presidencies. In 2019, we signed a ceasefire. He didn't respect it. He hasn't respected anything we've signed in many, many years. Vance is like, you have to conscript soldiers. You should be thanking us. We're like the only reason you can even have a war. And Zelensky's like, in wartime, everyone has problems. And I promise you, if we let Russia continue just carrying out as much invasion as they can all over the world, you'll probably have some problems too. You'll probably feel it too. And Donald Trump is like, don't tell me what I'm gonna feel. We're not gonna feel anything. Then Donald Trump goes just full abusive boyfriend mode and is like, I have all the cards. You don't have any cards. You're toying with World War III. Vance is back and he's like, you haven't even thanked the president this whole time, which, flashback, that's how Zelensky started his comments, was thanking Donald Trump. Then that's when Vance is like, you went to Pennsylvania and campaigned with the opposition. Zelensky's like, okay, no need to raise your voice. And Trump is like, he is not raising his voice. You're in trouble, mister. And Zelensky's like, yeah, I know, my country is in trouble. That's why I'm here. And then Trump is like, you can't win and you know you can't win. You can take what you can get. We've given you $350 billion, which is a lie. That number is made up and represents almost twice what the US has actually committed to invest in Ukraine. And then JD Vance is like, how dare you come here and litigate in front of the American media? And then Donald Trump is like, no, this is good. I wanted it this way. I'm letting it go on because I want America to see. The final question is that one of the reporters asks Donald Trump what the United States would do if Russia breaks a ceasefire. And Donald Trump says, what if a bomb dropped on your head right now? Also, Obama sucks. It's maybe his fault. It's Joe Biden's fault and Obama's fault and Hillary Clinton's fault and Hunter Biden's laptop. Really, at the end of the day, that's what this is. Hunter Biden in his bathroom with his laptop. Then Donald Trump says that this is all going to make for great television. And he ends the press conference before kicking Zelensky and his team out of the White House, not having lunch. Definitely not signing any of the documents that he started the day by bragging about getting signed.